So you were in Winter Park?
It's conversational. You can look at me. You don't have to look at me.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Live? Hey, it's Jordan. I am here in Orlando, Florida, fortunately in the shade because I'm pretty white and pasty. Yesterday we were in Tampa, St. Pete area, interviewing Michelle Rayner, who's running for Congress. She's the first woman of color, openly gay woman of color in Florida's State House. So we talked about the Don't Say Gay bill, which is one of these culture war on steroids bills going on in Florida that, in my view, in addition to the people it's threatening, LGBTQ people, is also a mass distraction tool to distract people from the economic misery going on in Orlando, Tampa, St. Pete, Miami, and pretty much all over the country, what I'm calling the new Gilded Age. So we spoke with her. Then later in the day, we spoke with at an art studio with LGBTQ students, parents, which was really interesting. You know, some people are like, Jordan, why are you covering this culture war stuff? Because it's all connected. If you're progressive, you should care about this culture war stuff because it's real people being affected. But it's all connected because, as Michelle said, and some of the students and parents I spoke with, they got real problems. Housing, rent, you name it, that now they're having to add on make-believe fights over, you know, gag orders for LGBTQ discussion in schools, obviously the critical race theory stuff. So we're going to get into all that. Busy day today. We're going to be interviewing Maxwell, Alejandro Frost, who's running for Congress here. Then we're heading over to the high school. We're going to interview LGBTQ high school students. One of them who testified in the Florida legislature against the Don't Say Gay bill. And then later on, we're going to be interviewing State Rep Carlos Smith, who's also LGBTQ. And he's said some very interesting things about what the nation could expect if Ron DeSantis moves further and further closer to the White House. So smash that like button right under the live stream. Share this live stream. Also support this trip. StatusCoup.com/Florida trip. Makes a big difference. It's expensive to report on the ground, so your donations really make a difference. That's StatusCoup.com/Florida trip. So you're running for Congress.
Yes.
As a Democrat. Not going to lie, as you've seen online over the last year or so, there's a lot of people kind of souring on if they have a D next to their name. I'm done with it. We'll talk about that because I kind of think people need to be judged on themselves, not if they're running as a Democrat, whatever. But I wanted to start because I went to Disney World as a kid. I was fortunate to go, and I thought it was magic, and I had no idea the economic machete that Disney World was taking to Orlando. It's pretty much Miami and Orlando, I would say, are some of the worst in terms of the affordable housing crisis here. And Disney World has gotten $2 billion in tax giveaways. And most of the tax giveaways they've gotten have gone to them hiring low-wage workers, seasonal workers, and during COVID, they laid off nearly 60,000 workers. For people that don't know, can you explain, basically Disney in many ways has bought Florida?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think a lot of it has to do with the type of politicians that we have in power, right? From the local level, the state level, even to the national level. And what we see is corporations like Disney, and Disney's one of the biggest ones, but definitely not the only one, especially here in Central Florida, that takes advantage of these politicians, owns a lot of them, and pushes them to a place where they're getting these $2 billion tax cuts, where they're getting a lot of these big tax incentives to do what they have already been doing, right? A lot of times it's not like they are getting these tax incentives and hiring a bunch of people full-time, good dignified wages, good benefits and everything like that. Our unions have to fight for that after the fact a lot of the times. And so that's pretty much what we see here. And it's not just Disney. We can take a step back and look at it from a bird's eye view, and we see it happening with Big Sugar here in Florida, with the sugar industry that's completely unchecked, and fossil fuel industry here in Florida. And it's creating a situation where essentially these companies are being rewarded for polluting our environment. And that's why we need a lot of good people who are willing to hold them accountable.
And can you kind of talk about Disney specifically? I mean, they're one of the most profitable companies on earth. How is it that they're getting all these tax breaks, but more importantly, how is that contributing to skyrocketing rents and the scarcity in housing available for people?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that when we give them these tax breaks, that's money not coming into our county government or city government. And I've been going to a lot of these affordable housing and transit kind of open forums with the county government. And when I go and speak with the folks who are doing the work, like the staff level, their main complaint is we need more money, right? We need funds so that way we can ensure that we can get affordable housing built, mixed income housing built, so people can not only have a place to live, but live near where they work. Right now we have a crisis here in Orlando. I myself was houseless for about 2 months. I didn't have a place to live because my rent went up 33% after the rent hike freeze was taken away in Florida.
This was during COVID?
This was last year, like October, November of last year, while I was running for Congress. And so it's a crisis right now. We need more housing. We need more housing near opportunity. And, you know, there's great people here doing work on the ground, and we're excited to partner with them to fight for justice. I mean, because we need that housing, and a lot of it comes, you know, it has to do with the money that the county government receives. And when they give those big tax breaks, they're not receiving that money, and we're not able to use it for social services or to fix this housing crisis that we have, fix transit in the city.
And also, I mean, real estate developers are, it's not only Disney, like you said. I've seen this all across the country. Real estate developers are essentially running city councils. They're giving money to Republicans, frankly, a lot of Democrats, and then you get these buzzwords like economic renewal, urban redevelopment, yada, yada, yada. But, I mean, you're running for Congress. You said your rent went up 30%. I've been reading stories about housing rent going up 50, 60%. Can you kind of talk about, frankly, even the Democratic Party here, they're taking a lot of money from the very people, and they're basically giving the keys to the land.
I mean, and that's kind of like the status quo, right, of a lot of, not all, but a lot of municipal governments across the country, especially here in Florida. I think there's some great solutions. Obviously, I'm running for federal office. I think a lot of these solutions are closer to county government and local government. But what I can do is fight for money so we can bring bold programs to our city and give them money so we can do things like, I mean, we're talking about a community builders program where developers kind of, you know, a lot of times a bad word, but we have an opportunity to train up developers who are from here, born here, who want to build up, you know, mixed income housing so that way folks can actually live in the city that they work in. So I think there's some really cool niche like opportunities for us to build people up and kind of change the status quo. But the first step, well, one of the first steps is electing people who aren't owned by these companies. And we're not, my campaign isn't taking any corporate PAC money, right? We're not taking that money. We're going to sit down with companies, right? We want to sit down with companies. Disney's one of the biggest employers in Central Florida, but that alone doesn't give them a pass, right? And so that's what we need to do.
And that's another thing. Disney is, I think, the biggest employer in Florida. And basically, I think to try and bring in tourism to Florida and bring in new people, the local and city governments view Disney as, well, we have to give them what they want because it brings in so much business that stirs the economy. But it's whose economy are you trying to improve?
Exactly.
Can you kind of talk about, I mean, Disney is obviously bringing in a lot of tourism money and this and that, but it seems like the priority is in tourism money and bringing out-of-state people here rather than actually making it livable for people from Orlando.
110%, and that's the problem that we have right now, right? I mean, it's what we talk about all the time with corporations across the country. It's valuing profits over people. And in this case, we're talking about the people who live here, work here, are part of this city. And like I said, I mean, like, not step one, but one of the first steps is electing people who aren't bought and paid for by these corporations. The second step is ensuring that, and I want to be clear too, I love theme parks, right? You were saying you went to Disney. I'm an artist, I'm a drummer. I see the wonder in creating experiences for people, right? You go to Disney, you kind of out of your life, you know, it's something that can inspire convictions of people that might change their life. And I love that, right? But we have to also dignify and celebrate the people who are making that vision come true. These are the people who are housekeepers in the hotels in Disney. These are people who are running the ticket booths, our ride operators, right? People who are making that vision come true for Disney are just as important, right? As the people at the top. not a lot of politicians are talking that way right now and acting in that way, and so we need to do that. Part of that's passing the PRO Act, right, and ensuring that our, that workers can unionize and organize within the workplace, and that there's not any serious repercussions due to that. And we've seen, I think Disney's a lot better than some other theme parks, but we've seen some theme parks here in Central Florida that take really, they're union busters, right? And so we need to fight against that.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, just running for Congress, so, there's a lot of people who rode the Bernie wave, 2016, 2020. I covered both campaigns. And since then, Biden becoming president, a lot of my audience, frankly, feel, we elected people who didn't take corporate money. We elected people who said we're going to bring the ruckus to the Democratic Party. And they don't feel they're fighting hard enough. And it gives them a blanket feeling like if somebody's running as a Democrat, they're just going to get in there and, make up excuses not to fight. I'm not trying to, make you say anything negative about the squad or anything, but I'm wondering, what do you say to people in the district you're running, but broader nationally, who are kind of like souring, just say, they're both, we have a one-party duopoly or a two-party duopoly, and I'm tired of knocking on doors or supporting candidates. Sure, they don't take money, but then they don't get in there and fight the way we need them to fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a few things, and the first thing I'll say is that's valid, right? I don't want to invalidate anyone's feelings or anything anyone's saying, right? You're valid in believing that. That's like the first thing out of the way. The second thing I'll say is, I mean, a lot of times, there are parts of that that's true, but we have to take a step back and look at the system that we're going into, right? If you talk about the squad specifically, we're talking about a group of people of color who have come from, low-income, disadvantaged communities who have gotten to a place where they're not members of Congress, right? And now they're within a system that has been built on top of white supremacy and pushing up the rich and the elite in our country, and they're expected to change that themselves. And what I'll say is this: I think it's unfair to put that onus on them alone. I think they are part of a bigger puzzle, and we just need to keep electing good people, so that way when it comes to these decisions, we have more people on our side and we can make the right decisions, if that makes sense. It's hard. I mean, I've gotten the opportunity to work in Congress on different things, on gun violence, and when I worked at the ACLU, the system sucks, right? It works really slow. The difference, though, with progressives is, even though we know that the system can work slowly, we're not going to change what we believe in and who we are. And I think that is something admirable and something we have to continue with. There are problems within the Democratic Party. 110% is part of the reason I'm running. I agree, there is a two-party duopoly, right? There's one party, there's another party. People who are independents usually don't get elected. I agree with that. But I think there's good that can be done within the Democratic Party. I know we've heard it for a long time. But as an organizer, my goal, man, it's about hearts and minds. It's about making sure everyone in this park gets to a place where we believe that we inherently deserve healthcare, housing, transit, clean water, and all these things by virtue of being a human being. And that culture change has to be at the center of our organizing, or we're gonna lose. You know what I mean? And the good thing about people like in the squad, or beyond the squad, there's some great representatives who are bringing this train of thought to their communities as people are starting to rise up. And we see things like, whether it's the campaign of Bernie Sanders or March for Our Lives or the Dream Defenders, these movements of people, Black Lives Matter, rising up and demanding more. And I think little by little we're raising that bar. And unfortunately, that's kind of politics, right? But it's important. And I'll say this, it's not the end-all be-all. Voting isn't going to save us, right? There's a lot of other things we need to do within our community to take care of each other when the government isn't. So I always take a step back. I think there's a few solutions here, and we got to do them all at the same time. And politics isn't all of it, if that makes sense. So that's the way I see it.
So you're basically saying people should. It sounds like you're saying people should look at individual candidates, but don't just think it's not all going to be solved if we just get 20 more progressives in there.
Exactly.
It's going to take a lot more than that.
Yeah, man. This is a kind of a long-term strategy, right, of electing poor and working class people to elect or to represent poor and working class people. And it's going to take time because we're up against a system that was built on slavery, classism, right? We talk about this stuff all the time, and it's difficult. And especially when we put that onus on people who have been the victims of these systems and have been a part of them. So and I know some people listening might disagree with me, and that's like, those thoughts are valid. And I'm frustrated a lot of the time with government. That's why I'm running. But me being elected isn't going to get us Medicare for all, right? But it gets us a step closer.
Mm-hmm.
And that step closer, I think, is worth the fight.
And how do you tackle the money in politics issue? Because another issue going on here right now is essentially Florida had a program to give Floridians subsidies for solar, and essentially the monopoly in Florida Power and Light, has kind of rigged it in a way where there's a bill going through that would take away those subsidies for
net
solar.
metering,
So basically, you have this corrupt system, which you'd be entering in Congress, where all these corporations, you're talking about solutions, but how do you tackle it if, I mean, there's Democrats who voted for that bill that would take away solar
One of
subsidies.
them is one of my opponents in this race right now, voted for that bill. That takes away incentives from people having the freedom to have their own power in their home, rooftop solar. Which I think we're in the sunshine state, right? We should be taking advantage of that. And you're right. I mean, money in politics it's one of these issues to end all issues, right? I don't think when we solve that, everything will automatically be fine. But I think it puts us in a situation where less of our politicians are being bought and paid for by corporations. Mm-hmm. But the problem is there's just a lot of switches that we have to turn off at the same time. Because if we solve money in politics problems and corporations having their hand in it, they're going to find other ways to be involved, right? And so that's where it gets to electing good progressive candidates all across the country. It's going to take time, but as we do that, I think we get to a place where when we're having these big discussions, we can talk less about how do we reduce harm and more of how do we get to the root cause of the problem.
Right.
And it's difficult to do that when the numbers are so low, to be quite frank. But we're getting there. So, I mean, money in politics is a big thing. That's why I don't take any corporate PAC money. We don't take any money from fossil fuel or anything like that. And, obviously it's part of my beliefs and who I am as a progressive, but also I want to live out and be an example to how I believe our politics should be. Mm-hmm. And for us, I mean, we have over, I think, 17,000 individual donors. Our average contribution was $29.25. So not as close as Bernie. We're not at 27, but we're getting there. And I think that's the way campaigns should be run.
And let me ask you, where, other than Texas, this is kind of ground zero for the culture war. We covered yesterday the Don't Say Gay bill, which is basically a solution for a made-up problem.
Yeah.
There's also critical race theory bills going through to stop critical race theory from being taught, to stop white students from feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And to me, I certainly don't want to minimize, because LGBTQ people are being threatened, black and brown people are being threatened. We're heading over soon to interview LGBTQ high school students. But to me, what people are missing, because people have said to me, Jordan, why are you covering these culture war things? Because it literally is enabling the economic misery. These mass distraction campaigns, not just in Florida but elsewhere, against transgender people, LGBTQ people, black, brown people, immigrants, are helping to distract the masses from what's actually going on. The economic Hunger Games, the new Gilded Age. You can't afford rent, housing. 60 Minutes just did a piece about Florida, and now you have to rent the American dream because people can't buy a home. Can you kind of talk about what should people know about these culture wars campaigns that are going on here, and who are, what is the threat of them, not just to the groups being persecuted, but everybody else?
Well, what I'll say, they are distractions, but they're harmful distractions, right? They cause real pain for the people that they're going to affect, but also we got to think about these. These bills are targeting the way our education system works, the way that we challenge ourselves to be better and get rid of our implicit bias and move forward in a way. And we understand that people are oppressed here economically, but also by race and gender, and all of these different things make up what we call identity politics. And for me, I think about my journey and thinking about identity politics, and there was a point in my political life where I was like, I hate identity politics, because I think the way we think about it is this perverted version where it's like, oh, you're black, I'm gonna vote for you because you're black, right, or something like that. But what identity politics truly is, when we think about where it comes from, is it's just about how I see the world and how the world sees me, and because of every part of me, right? It can be down to like wearing contacts or being in a wheelchair, the color of your skin, or where you were born, or how you talk. Do you have a stutter? All these little things are important. And I think a lot of times the progressive movement, I think a lot of times we like talk bad about identity politics, and there is that perversion that like corporate Dems or corporate, Republicans, they like to hone in on, especially like corporate Democrats. But I think we should talk more about identity politics, but what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
All these little parts that make up who we are and how the world sees us and how we see the world. And I believe that's going to help us craft legislation that actually sees the world through the eyes of the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe in the best society, when we craft legislation like that helps the people who need the most help, we all stand to benefit. And that's
Right.
why I'm for big universal programs like Medicare for all, right?
Mm-hmm.
But your question specifically, yeah, I mean, they're distractions, but let's not also forget they're harmful distractions.
Yeah.
They're going to have real impact, not just on this, not just on queer students, not just on black students, but on all these other students who are going to make up our workforce, our clergy, our teachers, our managers over the next years, right? They're being put in a system where they're saying it's okay to be racist. It's
Right.
okay to, not care about queer folks and just kind of toss that aside. And it creates a problem for the culture of our future. And the culture is really where the fight is, I believe, for
Right.
politics, because that's how the people rise up. And
Right.
so there's a lot connected to it. Yeah, I'll end with this story. I have a friend named X. Their former name's Emma Gonzalez. The person said, "We call BS March for Our Lives." And I remember the first time I met them, I went inside their room, and they had this thing where they were doing this like a art project where they wrote on like sticky notes every issue they could think of, like every single thing, and made it in a circle. And then they took this string and they connected like issues where they saw direct connection. And by the end of it, like it's like looks like one big circle, right? It's just like a big web of like crap, right? That's how we have to look at these issues. It's all so interconnected. Nothing is siloed, right? Medicare for all can help us solve gun violence because it's going to put people in a situation where they don't feel the need to solve the problems using guns, right? When we fight for things like a Green New Deal, when we're able to fix transit, crime's going to come down, right? And people are going to be able to work where they live. And so either way, everything is connected is the message. And we need to elect people who understand that.
And let me ask you, if you get elected to Congress, essentially these culture war issues, Republicans are winning on them.
Yeah.
And in my belief, to be straight up, Republicans, even though they are fighting for the wrong things, they're viewed as fighting by their base.
Yeah.
DeSantis, by all appearances, is already preparing to run for 2024.
Yeah.
And he's trying to connect with the national Republican base.
Yeah.
But it seems to me, because the Democrats, when they have control federally, sure, it's 50-50, I get that, but there's every excuse in the book. Well, Biden can't do this because of the parliamentarian.
Yeah.
There's a lot of excuses, Manchin and Sinema, but to me, it doesn't look like, it doesn't come off to working class voters that they are fighting as hard as the Republicans, even though the Republicans are fighting for these make-believe problems.
Yeah.
You get in there, how do you fight? Do you play hardball with your vote? Tell people, what is your mentality? You got to work with the other side. You probably have to work with corporate Democrats.
Yeah.
But how do progressives put up more of a fight to leverage their power?
Yeah, I mean, and like to take a step back, I think Democrats in general need to stop coming to the debate at the compromise, right? And I think a lot of times we see ourselves as taking the high road, being the ones to do that, but it puts us in a situation where we're not getting anything near what we wanted in the first place. Think about things like Build Back Better, right? And the 3.5 number that the number was much higher before that, but the 3.5 number we all kind of rallied around the fact that it hasn't happened yet. So I think there needs to be a change in the type of politics we talk about. We should be more comfortable with putting pressure on people within our own party in an outward public way. And that's also like beyond my politics. It's just as an organizer, that's what I do, right? We put pressure on people publicly until they come to where we need them to be. And a lot of times that's just how it has to work. And so I think the Democratic Party could learn a bit more from organizers on how we can push people publicly and we can be respectful, but turn up the heat so we can get what we need. And then the second thing is I think Democrats, we just need to be better at messaging. This is something we spoke a lot about there was a Florida Democratic convention, and a lot of the younger representatives were talking about the fact that we need to stop talking about what we're against and start talking about what we're for, right? People are tired people don't want to hear about Trump. People don't want to hear about DeSantis, right? Like, people want to hear about what is this future that we want to build? What can Democrats fight for? What do we believe in, right? What does Medicare for all mean for your life? Free at the point of service. How can that change your life and help you feed your kids? 60% of the people in my district, which with redistricting we're in right now, can't afford an unexpected $300 bill tomorrow. We got to talk about that. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but we got to talk about the kitchen table issues, right? You know, it's kind of a cliche, but it's true, and we've kind of stepped away from that, and we've been on the defensive a lot with the Republicans because they're fighting. I just believe that the average person just wants to know, how are y'all going to help me, man?
Right.
You know, I don't have health care, can't pay my bills, working 3 jobs, getting paid nothing, and that's what we got to talk about. And we can't fall in this trap of being on the defensive and, you know, bashing Republicans all the time. They need to be bashed, but we need to talk about what people want, you know, and that's what my campaign's about.
Where could people find out more about
your
campaign?
Yeah, well, you know, folks can find out more at frostforcongress.com. That's FROST for Congress.com. If you can chip in, you know, whether it's $27 or $2,700, anything helps out. And then also if you can sign up to volunteer, we need help. We need phone bankers. And if you're here in Florida, we could use door knockers too. You know, we're going to knock every damn door. We're going to call every number, talk with them about these big progressive ideas, which are very popular. And we're gonna win this seat, you know, because not because I deserve it, but because we're gonna put in the work. And so, yeah,
good luck.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. I'm gonna bring it in now.
Yeah,
cool. So we got one more interview lined up here, so don't go anywhere. Smash the like button, share this live stream to get it out to more people. Super chats are welcome. Come on in. Super chats are welcome. And again, thanks, man, to support this trip. And we're going to be doing 2 other interviews today after this. One at a high school with LGBTQ students on the Don't Say Gay bill. One of them testified at the Florida legislative session. We're also going to be interviewing Representative Carlos Smith later on, who has a lot to say about the affordable housing crisis, developers basically getting the keys to the city, as well as the Don't Say Gay bill. But these stories are important. And I know for a lot of you, you're interviewing a Democrat and the Democrats are corrupt, this and that. Yeah, I agree. But I want to interview candidates not so much to help them get elected, but because these are the people that know the issues most here. These are the people, Maxwell, whether you support him or not, he was homeless. He's an Uber driver running for Congress. That doesn't mean when he gets there, he's going to do everything you want. If you're in the district he's running, I think it's Florida 10, it's up to you. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. If you have Democrat fatigue, vote for whoever you want. Don't vote third party. I'm not trying to prop up candidates, but people like Maxwell, they kind of understand the day-to-day struggle here. And we're going to talk to Naqiy.
Yes, Naqiy McMullen. Thank you so much for having me to discuss Orlando's housing crisis.
Yeah, and between Miami and Orlando, it's some of the worst in terms of affordable housing. And I just call it the economic Hunger Games.
Yeah.
I call it the economic Hunger Games because honestly, he was talking his rent went up 30%. I've seen as much as 60, 70%. You have Wall Street investors buying up, as soon as a house goes on the market, Wall Street investors are offering cash deals at full asking price, sometimes over asking price. They purchase the house and then in some cases bulldoze them, build new houses or put a lot of money in to fix it up, and then they're renting it, at exorbitant prices. So it's become this thing where, a lot of people move to Florida, lower taxes, more affordable to live. But now, you're lucky if you could even rent one bedroom apartment. Could you kind of talk about, because you've done a lot on housing, transit, give people a feel for what's going on here and how it really is a crisis if you actually want to put a roof over your head.
Yeah, like you said, it's an emergency. The rent and housing prices are out of control. They've gone up 30 to 50%, and wages have not gone up nearly enough. In addition to dealing with all the other inflation, gas prices are skyrocketing. The price of food, and the working class that are the backbone of the Orlando economy cannot afford to live here. Instead of spending money on affordable housing and transit and the stuff our working class need, we're providing corporate subsidies to places like Disney, Universal, and the developers, like you mentioned. They're buying out the city council, they're buying the commissioners and getting whatever they want. and we, the people, are suffering. Like I myself come a low income background, and I'm lucky enough to live with family. Otherwise, I would not be able to stay here and do what I do. Orlando in particular has skyrocketing rents because of the Wall Street developers coming in here. They're buying up the housing, they're keeping it off the market, and they're speculating. They're making sure it's sold at the highest possible cost, and they're not providing any benefits to the working class. Our local leaders are ignoring the problem completely. We need new solutions at a local level.
Mm-hmm. And also, you mentioned, I was talking to Maxwell about it a little bit, but how do you get those solutions from the local level if the Democrats, Republicans are taking money from Disney, taking money from the real estate developers? I mean, seems to me there's, not just here, but everywhere, they're basically, for their campaigns and to stay into power, very, very reliant on this corporate cash. And then they're basically, in return, I mean, Disney gave $5 million to Republican lawmakers, and then they got about over $500 million in tax breaks. Democrats take a lot of money from these same people. Isn't that at the root of this issue? You get a lot of lip service from Democrats, but they're taking money from the same corporations buying off the Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. We, like you said, we have a two-party duopoly. The campaign money goes to whoever benefits the corporations. Like, we need to control the money in politics firstly, but we also need to organize, because money can't buy votes. The people have the power to vote for whoever they want. So we also need to get money out of politics. We need to find real solutions to our affordable housing crisis on a federal level, on a state level, and a local level. I myself, I'm a convicted felon. I'm not even allowed to vote. So I'm not to tell you who to vote for. I'm out here doing the work. I'm organizing. I work with various groups. We have rent strikes. We are fighting for rent control. There's all these tools that are possible to prevent the high cost of housing, people being displaced and gentrified, and the local leaders are not taking advantage of it. So it's a struggle, it's a hard work, and it might seem like an obstacle that is impossible to overcome. These millions of dollars in corporations versus little housing organizers, but the fight, you gotta keep fighting. I believe at some point in the long term, like Max was saying, when we have our generation affected, the boomers in control that own the houses, they don't care about housing prices going up. They're benefiting completely and not paying their fair share, just like Disney and Universal. But the younger generation that is truly affected, we need to get out there and vote and organize for all the things, rent control, tenant laws, tenant protections. We need to get money out of politics. We need to provide real solutions instead of funding $125 million roads, like you mentioned earlier. So they recently instituted a housing trust fund that they'll fund for $10 million annually, which is not nearly enough to solve the problem. And they just gave $125 million to Universal for a road through a new park. That $125 could have funded thousands of units of social housing to keep the people that are the backbone of our economy living here and supporting the economy.
So the the local legislature here in Orlando gave Universal, part of Disney, $125 million to build a new road.
Yes.
And only $10 million for affordable housing.
Yes, only $10 million annually pales in comparison to the problem. Not nearly enough. We need social housing that provides people of all incomes the opportunity to live, work, and play. We need to connect frequent transit with walkable communities so people don't have to pay ridiculous prices at the pump. Orlando is one of the largest transit deserts in the country. People have to deal with 3-hour-long commutes one way to Disney. Disney doesn't care. Local leaders don't care. They are only concerned about funding their pockets. It's funny, when corporations get welfare, it's considered to benefit the greater economy, but when lower income folks get handouts, that's considered shameful. That is a terrible double standard that we need to reverse. why do corporations only believe in the free market when it applies to working class folks, but not to them?
Yeah, there's no such thing as a free market. It's
Exactly.
So what do you say to viewers? Because not just my audience, but I think progressives, a lot of progressives have become kind of very cynical, jaded, saying, yeah, we know about the corruption, not just here. People watching probably have their city council, local officials, taking money from real estate developers, maybe not Disney, but giving all sorts of corporate welfare to Amazon or other companies. But people watching have said, well, we've tried electing more progressives into the Democratic Party, the Squad, obviously Bernie's 2 campaigns, and nothing's changing. Now I say to people, well, this corrupt system was not built overnight. I know people want to topple it overnight and right away, but unfortunately, I hate to tell you, eat your broccoli, it does take time, but that doesn't mean people's frustration and cynicism isn't valid. So what do people do? Like, you're more of an outside electoral politics person. You're doing direct action, organizing. What should jaded, cynical people who say, you know what, I can't vote for Democrats anymore, or I don't want to focus on electoral politics, what do they do when the system is so corrupt? I mean, what you're describing, $125 billion for a filthy rich Universal / Disney, and $10 million for housing.
Yeah.
What motivates you to keep fighting, and what's your message to other people who don't want to do different things than just focus on electoral politics?
Yeah, I'm completely cynical, completely jaded. Like, convicted felon, in 2018, they gave us our rights to vote back, and they immediately overturned that in the legislation by Florida. So I'm as cynical as they come. I think
I just want to remind people, Florida, by ballot measure, restored the voting rights for felons, and then the legislature basically made it null and void.
Instituted a poll tax.
Yeah, a poll tax. So direct democracy overturned. So when we're talking about, I am against what Russia is doing, against other countries that have authoritarian or fascist leaders, but there's a lot of instances right here where we have democracy, but if it goes a little too far, it's overturned.
So as far as my response to people are jaded and cynical as I am, I think they should do the work on a local level. That's where you can actually make a difference. I'm out here organizing. Go join your local DSA group or your local tenants union and organize for housing. Organize the people for the things we need. Electoral politics are important, but they're not a be-all, end-all. I myself am able to vote, so that's what motivates me. I can't make a difference in the ballot. I can't contribute it. I'm too poor. So I'm out here every day doing the work, yelling at our elected officials. It's the only thing that keeps me sane, putting up with our corrupt society. So I think you should find a community of like-minded people and organizing the people. You can really make a change. In St. Pete Tenants Union and Tampa Tenants Union, they have made some good progress instituting emergency rent controlled ballots, and you can do direct organizing, community aid to aid the people directly in need. Right. So yeah, if you're cynical and jaded, I agree. Fuck the Democrats, fuck the Republicans. Go out here, do the work, join your local advocacy organizations for housing, transit, whatever you believe is being ignored by our local leaders, and try to make a difference on the local level where it actually matters.
Right. And I'll be interviewing folks from the St. Pete Tampa Tenants Union tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that. Because I think the term affordable housing crisis, people kind of gloss over it. Gentrification is another vague term, but people get like the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
And this is essentially survival of the richest. And to me, I went to school in Tampa. I graduated in 2008. So, whenever that was, 14 years ago. Jesus, getting old. But it was getting expensive then. But compared to now, it's like unlivable. It's unlivable in cities like Tampa, St. Pete. Miami has a massive affordable housing crisis, one of the biggest in the country. Mm-hmm. And essentially, that's being glossed over because then you hear nationally, the economy's booming. The economy's coming back. Unemployment is down. GDP is up. And the Democratic Party is pushing this nonsense. Yeah, the economy is doing better if you count low-wage jobs coming back. All these low-wage jobs that came back during the pandemic, no disrespect, but the hospitality industry, a lot of these jobs added are in the hospitality industry. Non-living wage jobs, good luck if you have good benefits. Most people don't. So it all seems to be a bit of a mirage.
Yeah.
And the media pushes that, oh, the economy's doing better, there's a recovery, but it's kind of a fantasy recovery.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big problem here in Orlando. We're paying all this corporate welfare to Disney and Universal to bring in these low-paid tourism jobs. They do not pay their fair share to accommodate the uncontrolled growth in the low-wage industry here. Orlando regularly ranks 50 out of 50 metropolitan areas for average median wage. And when we have skyrocketing housing and rent prices, the people, it's unaffordable, it's unsustainable, they cannot live. So many people are displaced to have to drive 2 or 3 hours, not take transit, just drive hours away. And with gas prices the way they are, we need to have people live close to their jobs, and that's not happening because of the lack of affordable housing, because all the money is being spent subsidizing these corporations, causing the problems.
Right. And could you also talk about Disney in particular? I mean, why does Disney need $125 million for a road? Why can't they pay for it? Why can't Disney increase, wages to workers? I mean, they're making profit hand over fist. It just seems obscene. They spend so much money on PR for the magic and, happiest place on earth. But essentially, poor people are paying for rich people's subsidies. And then poor people are being told, oh, the economy's great.
Yeah, it is obscene. And people here were so-called married to the mouse. People love Disney. They don't want to do anything to upset them. Over the years, politicians that have opposed Disney and tried to make them pay their fair share have received, intense opposition. Their candidates against them were funded significantly. They were voted out from the back behind Disney. They put so much money in making sure they cannot be opposed in the community. What they say goes, and people are so in love with Disney, they're like, yeah, anything to keep Disney here, we'll go along with, which is the issue. We really need an entire cultural shift to realize corporations are not your friend. Disney, like with the Don't Say Gay bill, they haven't spoken out at all. And LGBTQ people love Disney, so they're really feeling betrayed right now. So I'm hoping people start realizing and waking up that Disney is not your friend. Despite Mickey Mouse is not a good person, we need to stand up to the corporations that are really oppressing us and oppressing the working class people here.
And also I want to touch on, because you do a lot of stuff on transportation, this is also kind of ground zero for the climate emergency. And there's, as far as I can tell, there's not much of a transit system here. So you have the I-4 and everywhere else, just nonstop traffic, gas guzzling, fossil fuels. Can you kind of talk about the lack of electric here, the lack of a transportation system, and how it's contributing to the climate inferno?
Florida's be the most affected by the climate crisis, and we're not doing anything to prevent it. We spent $8 billion adding Lexus lanes, toll lanes to I-4, instead of spending that $8 billion building a world-class transit system. Transit here is non-existent. Anyone who can afford or has the ability to drive chooses to drive, and that makes their overall transportation cost extremely high because people do not have the option to take transit, take a train for their job, and so they're forced to pay $5 or $4 at the pump because of a lack of options. The corporate subsidies that we could also be spending on affordable housing also need to go to fund a world-class transit system. Orlando has 2.5 million people here. One big thing is, so we actually have a big transit system operated by a private company, Mears. They benefit from the 40 million annual visitors here. They also provide hella campaign donations opposing transit and transit expansion. They run all the private shuttles for Disney and all the hotels. So a private company is benefiting while people relying on public transit they're fucked. We have a segregated transportation system that we really need to overcome.
Well, also right now, it's basically going to get to a point people aren't going to be able to even afford to go to work. I mean,
Yeah.
gas prices are through the roof. A lot of it's price gouging. You know, they say it's because of the war in Russia. Some of it is, but a lot of it's just these fossil fuel companies making record profits and saying, hey, we'll just blame inflation and jack up our prices. So there are families that, before the gas prices went up, that were very close to having to make some very difficult choices. And now, how do you afford a 2.5, 3-hour drive for Disney workers or other things if you have to fill up twice a week at $75, $80, $100?
Yeah, not only can you not afford to pay for gas, but now you also have to pay for tolls, because not only are we sold out to the real estate developers and the corporations, but our local leaders have sold out to the road builders that fund the unsustainable suburban sprawl that is really at the heart of our climate crisis. We're building billion-dollar roads in the middle of nowhere, destroying our precious nature, and then we're building all these McMansions that are unaffordable to working class because that's most profitable. It's most profitable to build in nature instead of building affordable housing close to jobs, which is what we need. We need to force developers to build the affordable housing, the workforce housing that helps the working class people that are in so dire need.
Absolutely. And my last question to you is, I mean, it kind of goes back to when you say organizing, what does that look like to people watching? How do they get involved in their community when the system is so entrenched, so corrupt? People watching might be like, all right, what if I join a tenants union? How are we going to go up against Disney, which is a multi-trillion-dollar company? What's your message to people about organizing, and how and why should they get involved?
Because the status quo is not sustainable. If you just let things happen, then you're also culpable. You have to make a difference, because we got to fight for a better future for our children, for our future generation that are truly suffering. There is good people in every city doing the work, and you got to find those people. DSA, I'm an active member, big fan. They are one of the few uncontrolled interests in our nation that are really doing the work and putting the working class people first. You yourself, you always speak truth to power. So there's good people. Just find them and never lose hope despite the obstacles, because that is what they want. They want you to lose hope. They want you to be apathetic and complacent. But we cannot do that. We gotta keep on fighting, because our entire future is at stake.
Thanks, man. Naqiy McMullen, housing transportation activist. I appreciate it. So we're headed over in a little bit to a local high school here. We're going to be interviewing some of the LGBTQ students who, one of them actually wrote a piece for the New York Times on this Don't Say Gay bill. And again, I think obviously there's a lot of attention being paid right now to the war. Understand that, the Senate hearing going on right now. But these issues are all connected. Don't just think, this is a Florida thing, or don't just think for the Don't Say Gay bill, it's only an LGBTQ thing. All of it is connected, because these culture war things are basically enabling Republicans to keep winning, because they are viewed and they are galvanizing their base because they are viewed as fighting. Obviously, they're fighting for bullshit, nonsense things that have real harmful effects on LGBTQ people, black and brown people, poor people. While the Democratic Party, as we've been talking about, they might be better rhetorically. They might seem like allies to LGBTQ and other groups, but economically, they're screwing you the same. They're just nicer rhetorically about it. So if there's two types of voters, active voters and non-voters, well, the non-voters are going to say, yeah, the Republicans are terrible, but why am I going to bother voting for a Democrat? It's all corrupt. I'm just sitting it out. Non-voters are the biggest voting bloc in this country. And then you have people who used to vote Democrat but have become so cynical and jaded that they sit out. And that's where the corporations want you, like he said. So really important to cover all these topics: the housing crisis, the local corruption, the Don't Say Gay bill, which we're going to continue covering today. So we'll be live again around 2 o'clock Eastern from a local high school, interviewing LGBTQ high school students. Later on, we're going to be interviewing State Rep Carlos Smith, who's also LGBTQ, but He's got plenty else to say on real estate developers and the corruption. So I'm looking forward to those. Please support this trip. StatusCoup.com/Florida trip. We got a couple donations yesterday. We could really use more donations. On the ground reporting is not cheap. Flights, hotel, rent a car, gas, and food. It all adds up. So appreciate any donations to support this reporting. Bigger than that, we want to grow our membership. So you could donate at StatusCoup.com/Florida trip, but you could also sign up as a Status Coup member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. You get to join us for our monthly members call through Zoom. You get to join us on our members Discord channel and behind the scenes videos. We're uploading a members video later today that we shot yesterday, kind of a behind the scenes feel from here. But definitely, if you can afford it, there's a whole lot of outlets asking you for money. They're mostly in a studio doing news of the day and hot topics. We're getting out there covering stuff that, trust me, does not go viral. YouTube does not want to elevate these things because they're not sensational, they're not scandalous, they're not conflict driven. YouTube really doesn't elevate. That's why for these kind of things we generally get lower viewership, but it's important to cover. So that's why we keep doing it. But we can't do it if we don't have the funding. We don't take any money from the big banks, fossil fuckers, big pharma, big real estate, Silicon Valley, military industrial complex. Our funding comes from you. So if you've been on the fence, get off the fence. Sign up today, StatusCoup.com/join. You could sign up for as low as $5 to $10 a month. That's 16 cents a day at $5 a month. It makes a huge difference, and we really appreciate any donations that can be made, big and small, to this trip. And that's at StatusCoup.com/Florida trip. Both of those links are in the description. And we'll be live again. What time is it now? We'll be live again in a little less than an hour. So around 2 o'clock Eastern, come back. We'll be interviewing LGBTQ students at a local high school.